Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. This is Rusty and Heather Bryant, and we're so happy to be back with you again today. And we are still talking summer shorts. We are in the middle of our summer shorts series where we answer questions. So if you are a listener and you've got a question for us, feel free to reach out. You can go to our website at theredeemedmarriage.com. and you can submit on the contact form. You can submit a question there or just on social media. If you want to send us a DM, you can find us on all the social media platforms, The Redeemed Marriage. So today's question is kind of a conglomeration. Is that a word?
You just made it one. I know what you mean. So
Is that a good word?
It's got to be a word.
Conglomeration.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Know. Spell it. Can you use it in a sentence, please?
Use it in a sentence. I don't know. It sounds like a good word.
Yeah.
All right. So what is it?
Well, we had the reason why we conglomerated them.
You did not use that in a sentence, right?
Okay. The reason why we combined them is because we were looking at our questions, trying to decide what we were going to discuss. And there were 2 or 3, maybe even 4 actually, that had something to do with children. Like, how do you tell your children about infidelity? If you should tell your children about infidelity, what you should tell your children about infidelity. And before some of you go, this doesn't have anything to do with me, skip to the next one, we're actually going to take it a little bit further and talk about how we should talk to our children about any kind of conflict or any kind of broken trust or hurt, because we all know that we have those in our marriage. And so how do you talk to your children about that, and how to kind of navigate the family dynamic when all of this is going on?
Mm-hmm. So when I start thinking about that, I think about our situation, and nobody gave us any guidance or told us how to do things, and maybe we got some of it wrong. Probably got some of it wrong, but we did the best we could. Because we also were coming from a background that didn't talk about deep things like this. For instance, my guess is that if some type of marriage crisis had happened in one of our parents' lives, we wouldn't know about it. In fact, if they had married right.
Any kind of conflict, to be honest. I mean, and that's not, I'm sure our parents listen to this. And so we're definitely not saying anything negative. But when we got married, it was my understanding that my parents didn't fight.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was a generational thing, and probably the culture where we grew up, and, even just where we were.
Well, and job titles, and there was a lot that went into it.
Yeah, and so a lot of people that are probably close to our age. Well, I would say that there's a lot of couples that we do marriage coaching with that are close to our age, and they say the same thing.
Sure, it wasn't just ours.
They're like, yeah, we just didn't hear that. That wasn't something that was emphasized. I think it is emphasized more today about just being open and honest with your children and having this line of communication where they understand your faults and your failures as individuals and as a couple, so that they learn from that.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of our culture we grew up in was, well, our parents loved us and they took care of us and all of that, but a lot of those harder conversations seem to be reserved for, like, at church, your youth minister, your Sunday school teacher, your small group at Sunday school, those kind of things. And so I don't know that we just had a very good understanding of how to handle something like that.
Right.
And so the first thing that I want to just say to everybody that's listening is, if everybody's situation is so different and everybody's kids are different,
And
you've got different
ages.
Yes, you've got different ages. You've got different personalities. You've got different levels of understanding. You've got different faith background. I mean, even faith foundations for children and teenagers and all that. So there's a lot that goes into it, and I think that not to get the cart before the horse too much. You like that I just threw that in there? You probably were like, well, why would you say that? You never said that before in your life. But not to get the cart before the horse too much. But I would just say, if I'm going to summarize everything that we're about to say, it would be that I would lean towards openness and honesty, whatever that looks like in your situation, that I would lean more towards that than keeping secrets.
Sure.
Now, I also completely understand and believe that there's details that do not have to be shared, and even for some of you, they're like, oh my gosh, well, we've had massive broken trust in our, maybe there has been infidelity, and we don't want to just be like, hey kids, let's sit down and let's talk about, what.
Listen to what mommy did or daddy did.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's times that come up along the way where you're able to speak into, hey, we've had serious, issues in our own lives that we've had to overcome, and that we've had to depend on God and trust God, and maybe they ask questions, and if they do, that's when you're able to discern whether or not you answer those questions. But I maybe we just jump in and we just tell people kind of how we handled it and maybe why we handled it, because a lot of it, the circumstances required us to handle things the way that we did. And so I don't know if you want to jump in and tell what we did. And
well, so our kids were, and you have to remember this was 15 years ago. So our kids were 9 and 5. And so they didn't need all the details. They, and I think that to your point a while ago is, you may be listening to this and your kids are younger. You may be listening to this and your kids are much older. And so it's going to vary how you handle it. But ours were 9 and 5. And I can just remember about a week after, when I had that true encounter with the Lord, I started praying immediately that God would protect them, that God would protect their hearts and their minds, and I feel like He did that because our story was so public. There was such opportunity for people to say things to them or be ugly on, about us, or especially me. But God just really protected them from that. Matter of fact, He may have protected them so much that we didn't end up doing our part. You alluded to the fact that maybe we handled things right, or we didn't. And I don't know if we did or not. Our kids have very different personalities. One of them does like to ask a lot of questions and the other one doesn't. But surrounding this, like there weren't many questions that were asked. And again, I don't know if it was their age or personality, or probably a combination of both. But we just told them a basic, at 9 and 5, that mommy had stepped out of the boundary of marriage. And we talked about boundary. I know that sounded like what a 5-year-old's not going to understand that. But we talked about a boundary, like we used our driveway as the example. And because we live like in a cul-de-sac, and we said, you can ride your bike or your scooter or whatever, and y'all can play out in the front, in the neighbor's part of the grass, our grass, all the way across, but you can't go past the boundary of the driveway, because out in the street, things can hurt you and and we went through all of that. And then we talked about how we drew that boundary of the end of the driveway, not because we were mean, but we did it out of protection for them and because we loved them. And that's what boundaries are for. And that God gives us boundaries in our marriage as well. And that He gives us the boundaries to keep our marriage safe and our marriage healthy. And we said, Mom stepped out over that boundary. And I mean, that's kind of how we explained it. And we explained that's why I was leaving for a few days. And, I mean, we just kind of did the best we could for a 9 and 5-year-old, but that it made sure they knew it had nothing to do with them. It wasn't anything that they had done, and that I was going to go stay with my mom and dad for a few days, um, and so we just kind of handled it like that. Then, as they got a little bit older, because they didn't stay 9 and 5. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I jump in there?
Sure.
This is, I think that for somebody that may be going through this and they're in the midst of this, that would be the encouragement, is that you don't just try to hide it and ignore it, because what I think the important part of what happened with us is that we knew that we may act differently towards each other during this time, because we were trying to save our marriage.
Yeah, and rebuild, yeah.
And so I think we just wanted to give them an assurance that they did not do anything. They weren't the cause of our emotions. And that I think the biggest thing was we wanted them to see us walking through, forgiveness and healing, whatever that looked like to a 9 and a 5-year-old. But I'm just telling, this is the encouragement for people to put that into their own story and say, okay, well, because in a minute you wanted to talk about legacy, but what is it that we're doing right now that's going to create a legacy and pass a legacy? And what you want is you want them to have this memory and this recollection of, man, look how mom and dad walked through a really hard season of their life, so that they can draw from that when it happens and, when things happen to them. But they were so young, and I think that for whatever reason, we gave them enough information. I mean, it was very clear that you had done something, but they didn't know what it was. But then because they were so young and we started working really hard, I mean, they saw us leave for a marriage intensive, so they knew we were working on things, but they didn't understand. But then because we healed, obviously we were healing, and they didn't ask any more questions.
Right.
And I don't know that they needed to, because they were watching us just walk out. I mean, our life was, it was as normal as we could make it for them. And so it didn't come back up until several years later.
Right. And so several years later, we were our church wanted to do a little story on us, on like for lack of a better word, the little bulletin, the handout that you get when you come in the church service. And our church went through a season where they were just doing life change stories on the front of the bulletin. And so they wanted to print our story. And we had not really talked about it any more specifics or details or allowed, throughout, do you have any questions? Since that 9 and 5. And so a few years later, when that happened, we were like, we need to make sure they're prepared, because we didn't want them to walk into church, because they were old enough to be in the service, and go, well, why are you on the front of the bulletin? And so, so we sat them back down, and, I'm thinking they were probably 12 and 8-ish. Maybe, I mean, that's not, the math is not right on that. Ish.
Yeah.
12, 13 and 8, something like that. And we took them out back, and we had s'mores, and we, just said, hey, we want to talk to y'all. Y'all remember several years ago? It was so funny, because they were, I was like, remember when y'all had to stay with Nana, and mom went and stayed with her parents? And they were like, I mean, there wasn't much recollection of that, but that was fine. And we just said, we just wanted to give y'all a little bit more detail. And so we talked about it a little bit more, and we told them, again, we used the, boundary of marriage, and that mom stepped out. And then we specifically said, mom stepped out of the boundaries, and it hurt daddy. And that we have been working really hard, and that we've been able to see God just restore. And it's much easier to talk to your children about it on this side of redemption, because they can see, what God has done, and see that we're still together. And there's not the fear of they're going to leave, because we've already been fighting for our marriage this whole time. So we went through all that. And again, we were very purposeful to say, do you have any questions? And one of them said, nope, I don't have any questions. And the other one said, I have a question. Can I have another s'more?
Mm-hmm.
So it was like no big, it wasn't a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So we had that layer of, and we told them often, if you have questions, just ask. Like, we're here for it. But we didn't want to bombard them with information that they didn't care to know.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I just kept thinking, I don't want to just throw on all
Right.
these details if they don't care to know the details, And I just kind of thought at some point they would say, hey, they never ask any details about it at all, which I also think was God's grace, because that's hard.
Yeah, and even these people, people that are listening, they're like, well, how does that apply to me? And I think that, for that age, it's like, how can you incorporate, because you're like, well, I'm not going to ever have, something printed up and written about me at my church. But I think that there's ways that you can incorporate what happened. Again, going back to the whole legacy thing, because what if, let's just say that a couple comes to you and you and your spouse, you've gone through some healing, you have a chance to talk and help another couple. Well, maybe you get a chance to say to your children, hey, mommy and daddy went through something that was a little bit difficult, and now we get a chance. I mean, that's a huge something for your kids to see. Maybe your kid comes home one day from spending the night at a friend's house, and they're like, why does Johnny's mom and dad not live together? And you go, hey, things happen sometimes in marriage, and we've had things that happen too.
And we made a choice.
But we've made choices to stay together. We've had to really rely on God. And it's just that you're not afraid. That's the biggest thing I would say is just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And again, you don't have to share every detail. You don't even have to share if it's that big thing.
Right.
You don't even have to share that that's what it is.
Right.
But if they ask questions, just be honest in the best way that you can, and the without throwing your spouse under the bus, and I think maybe that's the thing, is throwing the spouse under the bus. That's what we learned. We never did that.
No, we're always a team about that we were fighting for our marriage. There wasn't a ton of blame or calling out. It was just, we had a hard time, which you kind of absorbed without me asking you to. And I honestly didn't even know until years later that it was that big of a deal, because one of our children didn't even know that it was me that had the affair. He thought it was you, and which is a testament to how you handled it. He just was like, well, it's always the guy in the instances that he had heard of, and so he just assumed, even though we had told them twice that it was me.
Well, and that's why I'm very confident that whatever God needed and wanted to teach him, like, he allowed all of that processing for a reason.
Sure.
And we don't know why, because he ended up asking. He came to us and asked us when he was much older, teenager,
16, 17.
And asked us one day on our way back from church. And so we had a chance to just share, in a little bit more detail, because he could understand it. And then here it is, even several years later, where we've even gotten more information, because he talks, both of our kids, they just come to us with anything. They will talk to us about anything. And that's the beauty of it. But I'm telling people that because that's the result of being open and honest, is that they are like, oh, well, I can be open and honest with them because they were open and honest with me. And I recognize them as not being perfect parents that are untouchable, that I can talk to them. And so, we've come to find out just even over the last several months that, like, it was more of a, like, so much so that he thought it was me, that he went through years of trying to figure out how to forgive me.
Right.
Without ever saying anything.
Right. Yep.
And then when he found out the truth, it was like,
Whoa.
Well, okay. And, and so, I mean, I asked him point blank, I said, did you think about me differently during those years? And he said, yeah. And I said, but when you found out the truth, did you think about, and he goes, oh, yeah, even more differently when I found out the truth.
Sure.
And I think just talking with him through that and understanding that it was more of a testimony or whatever for us not, the emotions and the feelings and what we said about each other and to each other, it never caused, nobody was ever taking sides or, we weren't trying to get our boys and Team Heather or Team Rusty or whatever. And so I don't know. It's just, you look back on it and like you said, did we mess something up?
Probably.
Maybe, probably. But I mean, it's all part of God's timing and their story.
Well, and you can't outmess God. I mean, He's got it. He's in control. And even if we did do something like, oh, we should have done that different, He used it. I mean, He used it in their lives. And I've had lots of people say to me, how do you get your children just to open up and be so honest about everything? And I know lots of prayers for sure. And then I just know that it's the example of us being a mess too. Like they say, you've heard people say a mess attracts a mess. Like if you're a mess, you don't want to go to somebody who's perfect and talk to them about it because then it makes you feel even worse. But it's okay to be like, hey, I know y'all don't have it all together and I don't have it all together and I need help or I need to talk about this or what did it look like when this happened? And, I just think about this morning at church, they talked a lot about legacy. It wasn't on marriage, but it was about legacy and what you're passing down. And I hope, of course, I pray and pray daily that neither one of our boys will ever have to go through this story with their spouses. But I do pray I pray often that God will still use our story in their life, that they will be able to take what we've demonstrated as far as being open and honest and just freedom to talk about things and apply that, to their families as well.
Yeah. Well, you guys, you may be out there and you may be thinking, I think some of the questions would be, well, this happened to us, years ago. Our kids may be grown now. Like, do we need to go? Do we need to call a family meeting and talk to them? Yeah. And I don't think that's necessarily the case at all. It might be that that's the way that you feel led to, to open up to your family. But I think that it's just the willingness and I'm willing to be honest and open with my children, no matter what age they are. And it's just taking the opportunity when things come along in their life to be able to speak into it and then to be able to say, hey, there's something that happened in my past too, so I can relate to this because I just think that so many kids feel like they can't relate to their parents.
That we're old and we don't remember what it was like to be young and And even I had an experience this week with one of our children where I had a little bit, not frustration is too strong of a word, but I was like, oh, like, God is faithful. Like, trust Him with this. Like, he had a little something going on in his life, and you just want to go, hey, He's big enough for this. Like, He can cover this. You're fine. And when I start getting that little bit of frustration, I'm like, why am I getting frustrated? Because I have had almost 52 years of seeing the faithfulness of God, especially in these last 15 years, that, I'm fearful about something and God is faithful. And I'm sad about something and I always come out on the other side because He's faithful. Like, He will carry me through anything. And so when something pops up, like, that's why I feel like I walked through cancer pretty good. I mean, did I have days and moments? Absolutely. But I walked through cancer because I know He's faithful. He brought me through infidelity and made our marriage even better than it was. So I'm going to trust Him with cancer. And so then I came out on the other side of that. I've lost friendships I mean, I did when we went through our infidelity and felt so very alone, but came out on the other side of that. And God is faithful. And, there's all of these things that I can go back and list and go, I have known more and more and more and more each time that he's faithful. And I want that legacy, like we're talking about. I want to demonstrate that for our boys and for our family. And so I got a little frustrated because I'm like, he's faithful, but I have almost 52 years of seeing it. He only has less than 20, And so I leaned in and I was like, okay, God, like this is one of those moments in this instance, in this situation where he's going to learn that you're faithful. And so I'm just praying he gets to the other side of it, so that when he gets to the other side, he can say, you know what, even then in this, God was faithful. And it's just another way that they can learn that. And so as you share and as they ask questions and as just pray for opportunities, if God wants you to have opportunities to share, they will become available to where you can share, if not your story, just about the faithfulness of God. That in our marriage, even though it hasn't been perfect, you can say it as generally as that God's faithful and he brought us through it. And so he's going to bring you through this as well. You're going to get on the other side of this.
And when they're young, even, I mean, our children are older, but they're not 52, so they don't have 52 years.
Yep.
But if you're leaving a legacy and you're open and you're sharing about the faithfulness of God over and over, then they don't have just their life to look at. They have your life to look at.
That's right.
And I mean, that's biblical. Like even when, they would stack the stones and they would tell their children about the faithfulness of God, is because they were encountering situations. The Israelites were encountering situations where, the children were like, well, I didn't see the Red Sea parted.
Right.
I didn't see the conquest. All of these things that they don't know, so they have to borrow it from their parents.
Yeah.
And so we even say that sometimes about hope for you guys. We're like, hey, you may not have seen anybody in your life that has gone through what you've been through and made it to the other side.
And there may be people telling you it's not possible.
Right. And so you may not have hope for yourself. And that's why sometimes we say borrow hope from us so that you can become hopeful, because you can look at us and we can show you, yes, God is faithful. And you may not feel that or believe that right now. So,
and that it can be done. Yep.
Hey, our summer shorts wasn't very short.
Well, you had that cute little intro at the beginning, and I didn't get to sing my jingle.
You want to sing it
no,
now?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Go ahead and sing it in your head. You know they are. Shorts do 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 summer shorts do 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 summer shorts do 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 summer shorts. And it's
all right.
Not short.
See ya.
Peace.
Peace.